desertification is a thing, and it is happening because of management issues. But those management issues are caused by the Bureau of Land Management and the Department of the Interior, and their management, their belief of what proper management is, and that's a whole rabbit hole
Rabbit
we can
hole.
go down. But so then I come across Alan Savory's TED Talk, and Alan Savory is the founder of the Savory Institute that I highly encourage people to go check out. Alan Savory TED Talk. This guy completely is restoring desertification in Africa and doing it with natural processes. So I'm like, oh shit. My family, when they went out to the Arizona Strip and homesteaded, they're the Bundy Ranchers, by the way. So if you look up Bundy Ranchers take on the BLM or Bundy Ranchers, federal government, you're going to see all kinds of stuff. That's my family, and I watched them go to war against a corrupt federal government. They were like the early whistleblowers of, they're coming after us, and so I try to go to my family and say, hey, there's this new practice, and I tried to encourage them about regenerative, because our historical journal writings said that we went out to the Arizona Strip and grass was stirrup high, stirrup on a saddle, and we could throw seeds in the ground and dry farm and everything would just grow. Then 5 years later, the journals changed. The rain cycle stopped. They couldn't grow things on a consistent basis. The grass wasn't growing like it used to. They didn't understand that they had broken inadvertently the cycles of nature that was allowing for all of this growth. And so I'm like, oh man, holy crap, I just discovered something new. These guys are going to be so excited. That's
And they
not
were
true.
like, no.
They're like, what do you know? I'm the city slicker cousin, just so you know, just to be clear. I grew up doing the ranching and the cattle drives. I didn't wake up and do the chores. So here comes city slicker cousin AJ with some fancy new idea about ags. It's going to save us all. I'm so naive. But really yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, it's just interesting because like what you're describing to me, and here's the what Bear mentioned, the nerd in me going to come out is it blows my mind as a country, and then as just a human, like as an American and as a species, our unwillingness to look at things that are right in front of us. And I truly think in 10 years we will look back and say, what the hell did we do to our soils? And it's already happening.
Yes.
And individuals like yourself, I think, are the pioneers in that world, where it's the climate change and all these things. There's all these smoke screens of like drawing our attention to that, when right in front of us, our water supply, our soils are being degraded to a point where it's not sustainable. And that's sad, because if that folds, not only do we become so reliant on external sources, you're removing the power from your people then more and more. And that's
Yes.
the centralization you talked about initially. So it's one, when you start to dig into it, and it sounds like you went through this, you sound like the crazy guy, like shouting from the rooftops. But then what I love, and it's why I'm so appreciative of what you guys are doing, is what used to be a crazy thought 10 years ago now is getting talked about more and more and more. And of course, as with any nuanced good idea, there's going to be strong resistance to that. And you're seeing that as well. So it is an interesting battle. And I told Bear before we went live, like what's so encouraging to me is somebody who grew up on a farm, and then even now, like you've probably heard of Polyface Farms, Joel Salatin.
Oh, yeah.
He's a big name in the industry. I'm able to buy my meat from there, and raw milk. Even here in Virginia Beach, there's a huge community of people that are saying, like, and I probably have 20 friends who do it, and there's a bunch of local farms that you can buy a cow or a cow share in order to get raw milk. So just to see kind of the thing picking up more and more momentum is so encouraging to me. But, and you guys would know this way more intimately than I would, it's not going to be it's not an easy path to walk. And there's a lot of things, and I love what you said about it's not about flipping the food industry on its head. That actually is an unrealistic and ungrounded approach to this, at least in my opinion. It's what you said earlier of create parallel systems that slowly pull away from that, so that in 10 years we look back and say, yeah, like fuck that old model, we've moved out of that. But it's a transition that can actually take place in a real kind of stepwise fashion, as opposed to just, yeah, let's flip it on its head, this is the new thing. That's actually a kind of an immature way to look at it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And that's exactly what it was. My wife's cousin is married to this gentleman. His name is Neil Spackman. And if you go look up the Al Baida project in Saudi Arabia, this guy was contracted to go and lead this operation. And it was an operation to take a completely degraded piece of land. Like I'm talking not a single piece of vegetation as far as you can see, and the ground was all these little tiny boulders because it was so degraded. He interviewed in this documentary. He interviewed this old timer out there, and he said there used to be trees as wide as oil drums. Like this whole place was a forest, and so this wasn't natural. You would look at it and be like, "Oh, it's always been that way." No, man fucked it up. Like even in Iraq, I went back to Iraq as a contractor and ended up sitting next to the guy that ran the entire General Electric for the whole country and was an Iraqi born and raised citizen. And he said Iraq used to be a wetland. Like we've lost entire civilizations because Saddam Hussein was so worried about Kuwait that he dammed off the water tributaries, dried up the entire wetlands, and now it's a desert. It used to not be a desert. So one dude who was crazy changed an entire landscape, right? And so we look around and we assume that's what it used to look like. But ultimately, what I'm getting to is this. What he discovered in that project was we can go back and plant these trees, but we have to understand what led to that. And what led to that was economic decline. So people are starving and they don't have power and natural gas to do any cooking. So they go and level their forests so they can sell it to make money so they can feed their family. So you have to look at, it's what Savory says, everything works as a whole in nature. It's if you try to engineer it, which is the whole Bill Gates problem, an engineer sees problem A, solution B, point A to point B, distance B, shortest distance. Let's just go for that and fucking pump carbon out of the atmosphere into an underground storage tank. It's because it's an engineered thought process, but it's nature as a whole. So what we have to do, and this is where the app came in, is if we create a parallel economy where you can be paid more to do your job, now that's how we influence this other activity. So if I can help you earn more revenue on your operation, now you'll listen to ways that we might be able to introduce you to make more revenue. Like a regenerative producer, a good friend of mine, for example, Northern Utah, McMurdy Ranch, they've been doing regenerative for 5 years. They've cut out probably $250,000 of inputs. And that's inputs, fertilizers and fuels and all of these extra costs and herbicides and fungicides and pesticides. They don't need it anymore. They're increasing their forage. They're increasing the yield they can grow on their operation with decreasing their inputs. So these guys are now economically viable. We as citizens want our farmers and ranchers to be economically viable. Otherwise, we lose them. And then we have to look to the government to feed us.